In 2009, China completed Kangbashi, a brand new district in Ordos, Inner Mongolia. Gleaming towers, massive plazas, but not many people yet. The BBC filmed it and called it the city with no residents. In 2012, Western journalists toured Xiong'an New District in Zhengzhou. They aired empty shopping centres and quiet roads. CNN called it eerie. Forbes called it proof of China's economic time bomb. Then in 2017, China announced the creation of Xiong'an New Area, a brand new city south of Beijing, meant to host state-owned enterprises and become a smart capital of the future. The Guardian scoffed, another ghost city in the making. But fast forward to today, Kangbashi now has over 150,000 residents, schools and government buildings. Xiong'an is a key transport and financial hub in central China. Xiong'an is actively filling with high-speed rail, smart grids and China's top tech and public institutions. The Western media declared them dead on arrival. But they weren't dead. They were early. And that's what the West still doesn't understand. China wasn't building for now. It was building for the next 30 years. Let's talk numbers. In 1980, less than 20% of China's population lived in cities. By 2020, that number crossed 60%. That's over 500 million people who moved from rural to urban in just 4 decades. That kind of migration would break most countries. And in the West it has. Just look at the slums in Mumbai, the homelessness in LA, or the housing crises in London. But China planned for it. They didn't wait for people to flood into overcrowded cities and collapse housing markets. They built new cities in advance. They laid roads, hospitals, high-speed trains, shopping malls and schools before the first resident arrived. Were these cities empty at first? Yes. Were they supposed to be? Absolutely. Because in China, infrastructure comes first, population follows. That's how you control growth, not react to it. The West builds late and calls it natural. China builds early, and that's why it's winning. These ghost cities were not random. They were engineered. Tianfu New Area near Chengdu is now a rising innovation district. Langfang, between Beijing and Tianjin, is part of China's mega-region plan. Guiyang transformed its ghost zone into a big data hub, hosting companies like Huawei and Apple's cloud infrastructure. These weren't vanity projects. They were placed near future airports, rail lines and industrial corridors on purpose. The West lets markets decide where cities grow. China decides where cities should grow and then builds them. Please take a moment to drop a like and subscribe. Here's the genius part. Even while they looked empty, these cities were already fueling China's economy. How? Well, construction boosts GDP. Every tower, subway line and road created jobs, massive demand for steel, cement, labour and logistics, all feeding industrial growth. Land sales fund local governments. Over 70% of local government revenue in China comes from leasing land. Ghost cities raised land values, turning empty plots into multi-billion yuan assets. They create long-term economic zones. Even half full, they're magnets for future factories, tech parks, data centres and logistics hubs. Western countries print money and hand it to banks. China builds physical infrastructure and turns it into long-term economic power. Let's be blunt. New York is decaying, London is unaffordable, Los Angeles is a homeless camp with highways, Paris is choking under its own density. These cities weren't planned, they just grew, then broke. And it's not just the West. Let's check out China's neighbour India. Mumbai is drowning in slums. Delhi is one of the most polluted cities on earth. Bangalore, India's so-called tech capital, can't even keep its streets dry or its trash picked up. The infrastructure is collapsing before it's even fully built. The traffic is chaos. The water isn't drinkable. The power cuts out and there's no plan. Just sprawl, noise and patchwork development stacked on dysfunction. Now compare that to China. Have you seen how clean, organised and modern Beijing and Shanghai are? Wide roads, functioning subways, world-class airports, zero slums, the air is clean, the streets are safe, and everything works at scale. That didn't happen by accident. That's because China eased the pressure by building entirely new urban zones. You don't get clean megacities without giving people and industries somewhere else to go. The West crammed everything into one urban core. India crammed everything into chaos. China spread it out by design. Ghost cities weren't just preparation for the future, they were relief systems to keep the present from collapsing. Let's talk about what China didn't do. It didn't become like South Korea, where nearly half the country's population lives in Seoul. All the jobs, all the power, all the opportunity concentrated in one metro area. And now they're stuck. Housing is unaffordable. Every young person feels forced to move to Seoul. And the rest of the country, it's drying up. And the UK? Same story. Everything flows into London. Government, finance, tech, culture. And outside of it, you get shrinking cities, resentful towns, and complete economic imbalance. China looked at that model and rejected it completely. Instead of jamming everything into Beijing, Shanghai or Guangzhou, China said, let's build more cities, new ones, from scratch, new hubs for jobs, new homes for families, new infrastructure for growth, all connected by high-speed rail and modern transport, not old-world chaos. China didn't want one capital to dominate the country. It wanted a network of cities, planned, distributed, and ready to absorb the future. The West concentrates everything until it breaks. China expands until it stabilizes. Here's the real reason the West never understood China's ghost cities. China doesn't think in election cycles, it thinks in generations. In the West, everything is built around the next 4 years, the next vote, the next approval rating. Big ideas get kicked down the road and long-term strategy dies in a committee. But China plans for 2040, 2050, 2100, and then actually executes it. Ghost cities are just one example of that. But the mentality is everywhere. Take rare earth elements, the foundation of all modern tech EVs, wind turbines, semiconductors, batteries, fighter jets. Back in the early 2000s, China realized where the future was going and started stockpiling, mining and controlling global rare earth resources. Today, China refines 90% of the world's rare earths. It produces over 80% of the world's solar panels. It owns most of the supply chains for electric vehicle batteries, lithium processing, and wind turbines. Western countries are just now scrambling to build resilient supply chains. But they're 20 years too late. China already owns the future of green energy. And what did the West do while China was planning this? They were arguing over climate change on TV. They were subsidizing oil companies. They were mocking ghost cities without realizing those cities were being pre-built to support the exact industries China was positioning to dominate. Think about it. Where do you put your solar factories, your battery campuses, your EV hubs? You can't fit them in already overcrowded cities like Beijing or Shanghai. You need new cities with land, power grids, transit, labor, housing. China already built them. So when demand hits, China isn't scrambling, it's ready. This is why the ghost city narrative is so laughable in hindsight. The West saw empty buildings. China saw future tech zones, industrial clusters, smart logistics, hubs, government relocation zones. The ghost cities weren't failures, they were physical proof that China plays the long game, and always has. And while Western democracies waste years arguing over rail budgets or zoning laws, China just builds. Because when you plan 30 years ahead, you don't ask for permission, you create the future, and let the world catch up later. Ghost cities weren't made to impress CNN, they were made to future-proof China. 5G networks, EV infrastructure, AI zones, smart energy grids, built-in zones for green manufacturing, robotics, cloud computing. These aren't cities made for shopping malls, they're cities made for the industries of tomorrow. The West is still trying to lay fibre under cities built 200 years ago. China skipped that step and went straight to the future. The West laughed. The West filmed empty apartments and declared defeat. But you know, the truth is now undeniable. China's ghost cities weren't failures. They were preparation. They absorbed one of the largest rural to urban migrations in human history. They powered GDP growth through real construction, not fake finance. They distributed opportunity across the country instead of choking a few mega-cities. And they laid the foundation for entire new industries, long before the West knew what was coming. The West laughed. The West filmed empty apartments and declared defeat. But the truth is now undeniable. China's ghost cities weren't failures. They were preparation. They absorbed one of the largest rural to urban migrations in human history. And now? China has by far the best infrastructure in the world. Over 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, the most on Earth. Megaports, megabridges, smart cities, bullet trains, digital grids. While the West debates potholes, China is building underground malls, drone highways and entire clean energy cities. And what about those ghost cities? Let's name a few, because they're not ghosts anymore. Kangbashi, Zhengdong New District, Tianfu New Area, Yujiapu, Xiong'an New Area, Lingang in Shanghai, Nanhui New City, Binhai New Area, Zibo's Zhoukun District, Guiyang's Huaxi District, Changsha Lake City, Hengqin New Area. Every single one of these cities was mocked. Every single one is now growing, thriving and proving the West wrong. And while CNN and the BBC keep rerunning their favourite 2012 footage, China is building the world of 2050, one city at a time. This isn't about real estate, this is about vision, about foresight, about national will. Because while the West was writing clickbait, China was building the next century. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like and subscribe to the channel.